Hey guys, Brent Porcio, TopVelocity, and we've got Ryan Croton here and Jordan
Oseguera.
I would butcher it if I didn't make you say it. From ArmCare.com, or Throw Fuzz. I like that, should be the new name, right? Throw Fuzz. Ryan just did, and Jordan just did some presentations on ArmCare.com and all the great science behind it, and we'll be putting that out on YouTube more than likely because it's long videos. We just did one live earlier today. You can go watch with Ryan presenting a lot of, pretty much encapsulating everything that ArmCare.com does. So that was really cool. But today we wanted to have kind of a roundtable discussion, I guess, the state of the union of baseball and where it is, and maybe how we came into this, and you know where we think the industry's going. I think that'll be a fun part of it. Let's try to talk about where it is today, and where we hope it goes in the future, and what would make it better. We're all mic'd up. We're here on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, if you have any questions, ask some questions. We'll try to get to them. If anyone wants to be on, we'll be glad to take someone on. We can actually see you behind us. We can talk to you on the screen behind us. So if you want to come on the feed, let us know. But Ryan, just I guess because everybody's always being introduced, hopefully they know me. Let's tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Croton. I've been around the block in a lot of places in baseball. A college coach, played independent league baseball, did my PhD in baseball-related science. Faculty member, I got 10 years experience in Major League Baseball, and now I'm getting into business. I'm really learning about the private industry of baseball, which is really great. Get to meet great people like you. So.
Thank you. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, Jordan Oseguera. I'm Director of Performance and Pitching with ArmCare. Prior to that, I started kind of my coaching career after I got done playing in all those beautiful independent ball leagues in Tijuana, middle of nowhere, Texas. From there, I started coaching at my alma mater, Vanguard University, which is an NAIA school. Ryan always calls it the Ivy League of the West Coast. A lot of great talent comes out of there. And then from there, I got a chance to go coach in professional baseball. That's where I met Ryan. From there, I held a bunch of different positions, from pitching analyst to assistant programs coordinator, rookie ball coach, and a little bit of everything, and really kind of dove into dynamometry, which is what ArmCare.com is, doing a lot of work with Ryan, and that brings us kind of up to date.
Yeah, once again on Instagram, if you have any questions, let us know. I see some guys wanting to jump in on the feed. Give us a second. We're going to just talk a little bit about where baseball is today, and then if we have some time for Q&A, that's when we'll be asking you to jump on. So. Oh yeah, I'm paying attention. We got two things going on. Talk about let's just define where we think baseball is today, maybe where it's come from. You got to put it in a nutshell. So put it in a nutshell what you think when it comes to the behind the scenes, the player development, team, player management. I guess let's do player first. We're going to focus player first, and just kind of deliver where you think we are today, and maybe a little bit where we've come from.
Yeah, I can comment a little bit on that. I've talked to a bunch of teams who are interested in injury prevention and to be able to give that kind of insight to players. I think what's going on in baseball is that our information, that's why I like what's going on here, is very coach heavy. But I believe that we're going to get further when we can make it more athlete centered, for them to be informed. A lot of the things that I've experienced and the people that I've followed and been mentored by is to be a consultant to players. I know we talk about this a lot, is to really understand them and be a guide and not a dictator. And I think when we give athletes more education on their level, we create more buy-in and they're involved in the process. I mean, my big thing in player development is that we need to individualize. There's no excuse to say, well, we got 300 athletes, man. We got 150 pitchers and we got, I don't know, another 210 position players, and we need to have some kind of order. I think that makes it simple. And I don't think we want to take a simple solution to a complex problem, and that's to keep athletes on the field. And when it comes to professional baseball, they got to get a return on investment, and that's why I like our dynamometer, our product, because it has a better chance of keeping their athletes on field and to contribute to wins and contribute to organizations.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously covered a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the great things that I'm seeing with is the ability to individualize. And you showed us some stuff here where you're able to really individualize what that low-hanging fruit is for your athletes. And that's just something that me and Ryan were always big on, and one of the key words we always used when we were working together with the Angels was, what's the low-hanging fruit with this athlete? And people started going, man, I never thought of it that way. What's going to give us the biggest return for the least amount of work that we can tackle instantly, help that player with his buy-in, help him with his career, but then also now we can start layering in complexity as we go. So that's one of the cool things that, hearing you speak, I've always listened to your stuff. I've met you a couple times here and there, but being able to kind of go through and see your processes, it's really in depth. And I don't think people really understand the value that they get when they come to a place like this, because it just goes so deep onto what that individual development is.
Yeah, and I like to always look back and just see how the game is changing, and then because it has a lot to do with why the player perspective or the player development is changing too. Like, my favorite thing when people are always like, why is velocity so big today? And it's like, well, let's just look back in history and see what the game has done to demand that. And you go back from our childhood, and you had starters actually back then. Remember, you had pitchers that actually threw 9 innings.
What are you talking about? Nobody knows what this is anymore.
So you had starters back then, which they almost don't want them anymore, right? So you had these 9-inning guys. You pretty much had to go out and pitch the whole game. Then, this is what, we're going to go back to the 70s, but let's go before the 60s, right? That's where it was probably in its heyday. It was the starting pitcher. He's going to win this game. He's going to win the season, right? And then all of a sudden, I think statistically they started to figure out that pitchers they start getting hit around 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, right? They start becoming less effective 3rd, 4th time through. So what happened is they go, hey, let's try these relief pitchers, or let's see if we can bring more strategy to the relief pitcher. And then they create the relief pitcher, and all of a sudden it becomes not so much a demand for the starting pitcher to go 9. Now it's just give us good 6 or 7. And then we're going to bring in this relief pitcher, and then all of a sudden the closer shows up, right? And I think who was the first big closer? It was the Oakland A's alum from the 70s.
Oh, man.
I don't know. I grew up watching Dennis Eckersley, but I don't know.
Eckersley, no,
Yeah.
Eckersley.
Yeah, was it?
But it was Eckersley.
I'm pretty sure it was.
I don't know if he's that old. I don't want to date myself.
Was he in the 70s? Late 70s?
He was awesome. I remember
He was
that.
awesome. But
We're on the live. Someone can leave it in the comments. So yeah.
Oh, it was Eckersley. But then it developed this closing pitcher, and then it started. Then they actually recorded saves. They actually had to give it a statistic to that pitcher, because the only statistic to a pitcher winning a game was a win. Well, if the pitcher that threw the 6, so what? Here comes the save. The save actually is instituted. So the game is changing, right? And then all of a sudden they find out, well, there's almost a different role of the first relief pitcher to the closing pitcher, and then you develop these middle reliefs and these setup roles, and all this started to evolve, right? And then all of a sudden you started filling up the staff with a lot of relief pitchers when it was just always looking for starting pitchers, right? So now, but think about how that changes the athlete. So think about how the athlete now has to train differently. So the 9-inning pitcher back in the 60s, he's going to train different than the starter today, of the 5-inning starter today, because he's throwing less pitches. And now that's where velocity comes, because now you've reduced the volume of throwing for the starter, and now you got these little short inning pitchers at 20, 30 pitches. You've reduced the volume. What happens in any sport that's built on speed when you reduce volume to the athlete? The speed of the game improves, because they have more now anaerobic energy they can develop, because anaerobic energy is more powerful, but it doesn't last as long, because now they don't have the demand to go as long, so they can start becoming more anaerobic athletes. So the point is pre-1970, the pitchers were more aerobic based, probably. I don't know if it's
Smoked, I think.
I don't know if it's a great word for it, but and then
how aerobic they were.
Right, exactly. And now they become more anaerobic, I guess. So the game changed the demand for velocity. Am I wrong? Do you think the game changed the demand for velocity?
I would agree with that, because I remember, and again, a lot of guys who've listened to our stuff know that I mentored under Tom House, and he always had this thing where it's like he thought the game was going to move in a direction of 3-inning, and 3-inning chunks, where it's going to be, you're going to have a guy that goes 3, maybe 4 innings as your opener, and then a 3-inning mid-relief, and then a 3-inning save. And you're going to kind of rotate through this on a 3 to a 4-day rotation, and you're going to keep hammering these guys through. And a little bit of it has gone that way. But also when you look at the actual data of it, the teams that are winning are still relying on starting pitching. Those are the guys that are still going out there and they're pitching deep into the games. You have a Max Scherzer. You have a Justin Verlander. Now, I wish everybody was like that, obviously, but definitely 100%. I think the game is more and more going that direction.
So think about, we're the coaches and the trainers supporting the athletes. So the athletes are coming in us going, hey, they want more velocity. Why do they want more velocity? Is because there's a more demand for it, because the volume's down, because they're not throwing as many innings. So it creates a more competitive, it becomes a more competitive commodity for a pitcher to throw hard. So they come to us going, I got to throw hard. And then we start changing our training to help them throw harder. So I think what you were talking about initially, where it's, I go back to your original thought. It was how we've become more supportive of, like I think you said it. It's become less coaching focused, more player focused, because the game is demanding that.
Yep.
Because now we have more technology that can get into the kid's hand.
Yep.
Like the technology to record your biometrics used to be what, a couple $100,000?
Bunch of cameras, dark room, dots.
Yeah, I mean,
strip down half naked and go let them have it.
I'm just kind of on that, like Jordan himself, he digitized so many pictures. I'm talking on a screen with a free program. If you're out there, it's called Canovia, and he basically went in dot by dot to identify these joints and to be able to understand movement. You're hitting it right with the players. I mean, that's kind of what I resonate with in terms of today's athlete and velocity development, player development. We have to ask and answer the question why. When a player comes to us and they say they're seeing stuff, they're reading stuff, and we're in control of their player development, and we have a player development model that you might have to gulp and say, well, wait, what he's seeing, it might make sense, and they're bringing us information. The old, hey, I got to listen to coach. And furthermore, when you're in pro baseball, nobody calls you coach. I mean, so one of the college guys he got signed, he's like, hey, Coach Croton. I was like, who's that guy? So, I mean, you need to have that dialogue, and you're right, there's so much information. You're putting out a lot of great information. We're trying to put out information, keep the players educated, because if the coaches aren't keeping up, the players are the ones that are going to move the coaching forward. If we educate them well, if we get the message out to them.
I think everything's becoming a coach in your pocket, like coach in your pocket, the app for our training, coach in your pocket. All the ways to measure tech is getting so small and so cheap, it's a coach in your pocket. So it's allowing the player to really be the coach, or have the coach more portable right there with him, as opposed to relying on someone. So I think, Jimmy almost just fell.
Oh no.
He's coming at you. But the point is I think that's why we're seeing I think everyone puts it on us, like we're changing the game. I feel like we're assisting the change, but the game change is coming from, I think, first the demands of the game, and then everyone outside of it trying to find the tools and the innovation to help the players adapt to it and improve with it.
Well, it goes into supply and demand too. It's not going to be like, front offices are going to know what they want, and right now their demand is harder throwers. So that, in a sense, the game is changing at the top level and the bottom level. And in the middle, there's still a lot harder throwers when it comes down to it. I remember when I was in college, like, man, if you threw 88, you were a good hard thrower. I got a kid right now in Pennsylvania. You know him. He just signed with a Division III. He's 88. He's a senior in high school, and they're like, hey, you're a D3 guy. Because everyone's just throwing so much harder. So it's not just a demand at the upper levels of the game. It's a demand at every level of the game.
Crazy.
Harder and harder throwers.
It's insane. So let's take, let's be brave. Anybody wants to come on and talk to us? I hope we'll get the sound. Let me see if anybody wants to get into the feed. If not, let's see if we have any questions. Do we see any questions? Oh yeah, I forgot. Now you have the new question section. That's not it. I don't think there's anyone in there.
We're waiting for the questions.
It's probably they don't use the questions with me because I never tell them to go, or I never look in there. Watching from the UK. There we go.
That's
Thank you,
amazing.
man. That's pretty cool. Anybody want to join in? Anybody want to come to the feed? I think earlier someone requested to come on.
You can just pop up the questions.
Why don't come up here and do it? I did. There's nothing in there.
No, there's pop up in the
What's a couple exercises for a tired labrum? There you
Okay.
go.
There's request to join.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, he's going to join? Yeah.
We'll do that later. Answer that
So
question.
yeah, so the one for the labrum, we just talked about this. The reason why your labrum has an exposure to risk is that your internal rotator strength is weak. That means that your bicep has to handle a lot of the load to slow the arm down when it's in layback. If we have a lot of tension on our bicep, we put a lot of stress on our labrum because that bicep tendon rolls. You roll, I just said, if you roll elastic band, it creates tension and it can pull off the labrum. So one of the things that happens in baseball is that they have super strong posterior rotator cuff muscles. You half a pitcher nowadays in professional baseball from front to back, their backside is so much stronger than their front. We've been taught, don't press them, don't do overpress. There's a lot of things, we treat the player like porcelain. But if we're able to increase our eccentric internal rotation force, so if I had a band and I'm walking out with it and it's high, I got a lot of tension on it. I mean, at TopVelocity, we sell a crossover symmetry band at 40 pounds. I'm talking one of those things. I walk out and I got maximal tension and I'm just controlling that layback. I'm getting that activation of my internal rotator cuff while it's lengthening, and I'm offloading the bicep, okay? And the other thing too, when we do bicep work, you know, it's always been a taboo thing, but I'm gonna tell you right now, there are lots of studies to look at cadavers where they cut muscles away, and once they chop the bicep, the whole elbow falls apart, okay? The bicep also stabilizes the arm. When you throw, the bicep's also helping to keep your shoulder joint in place, okay? It's an important muscle. You know, TRX falls, those are important. Doing eccentric biceps as well, like I do them with barbells. We might get into training a little bit later on today while we're in here, but I do a lot of barbell work for the bicep, even when I do my warm-ups, okay? So if I'm doing a moving lunge, I do max contraction of my bicep. I want that really good and active before I throw. So that can also help protect your labrum. Those are just some of the many things that are important. Then you also have to have good scapular position.
Right, that's, you know, I like to go scaps first because I typically find with the scaps, it would have been easier if I had a clip. Because I like go scaps first because if the scaps aren't moving well, they're the foundation. Like the humerus, the glenohumeral joint is basically stabilized into the scapular joint. Where if the scaps aren't stable and they're just sitting there, you're going to struggle to do anything healthy from the upper arm down. So I find it, I think when I try to address an issue, I find a lot of it comes in the scapular dysfunction. Yep. Like I think because we throw so much, the serratus anterior just gets so fatigued. I think you were talking about how calcium comes in. I think it gets loaded with calcium and it's dead usually after throwing all day. And then the guys come out the next day and it still isn't recovered. And so if that serratus is shut off the next day, now your scaps aren't upwardly rotating, they're not protracting. So that means you got basically a big weight pushing down on the top of your shoulder. So all your layback's gonna feel like crap. Like everything's gonna feel like crap, you know?
Yeah, it's like, so for me, it's like two pieces of land. Yeah. There's your scapula, it's gotta create a bridge to, you know, here's my humerus, it's gotta rotate up. The scapula's gotta move to allow, you know, your upper arm to move. But one of the things, you talked about serratus, it's awesome. That's my favorite muscle, in throwing.
So I started laughing a little bit.
Yeah, I talk about the serratus a lot. The serratus is like these it looks like fingers at the side of somebody, but it's inside the shoulder blade and attaches to the rib cage, and it's important in upward rotation. It's one of the most important muscles to get the shoulder blade moving up so that you can set your arm position. But a lot of the training that happens is even with the shoulder position. You know, getting your hands on the ground, push-up positions. They have things like push-up plus. That gets your serratus active. But really, you get more activity when you're above shoulder height, landmine pressing. But, you know, you even see with a landmine press, you see athletes stop. They don't try to do any protraction.
All the pluses should be here and up, right?
Well, another thing I really looked into when I was with the Orioles, we came in, and a friend of mine, Brady Anderson, he was the VP of baseball operations. He was my boss. And I saw him doing handstand work with athletes. And now I was a former gymnast. Until I was 13 years old, I was in gymnastics. And I had always thought, you know, gymnasts have incredibly strong bodies, okay? They do have shoulder injuries, but not that often, all right? And you watch them do like iron rings. I mean, you got this stuff here that they have tons of strength. They have huge amounts of mobility, going into rolls. And the thing is that they have so much strength. So doing, looking at what I call inverted closed chain co-contraction for the shoulder, like handstand work, I think is so important because now, hey, we're in an upward rotation position. My serratus is putting my shoulder blades
once
up,
again,
and now I have the ground reaction force through my hands.
Once again, we should all be overhead lifters. I mean, you can flip yourself upside down, or you can just put a bar over your head. Right?
You can do, you can do both. I mean, there's so many ways. There's so many ways, and you make a good point. Here's another thing I've been reading. I came here because I wanted to show you some of the things
you got
I
him
do
on
with
a
a
tangent. Here we
barbell,
go.
but in pressing, okay? So one of the things we saw with our pro athletes, they were healthier if they could press. We use dumbbells to associate this for a estimated max at 80% of their body weight. Okay, so if I'm 200 pounds, 160 pounds worth of dumbbells, 280s in each hand, was my estimated max. They had a less percentage of chance of one treatment with our trainers or winding up on the injured list. But when I started looking into research on pressing, there is a big difference between pressing while the body is laying down on a bench and pressing while it's on the cable or standing.
Yes, yeah.
When you're standing, most people, most athletes can only achieve 40% of body weight strength, much less strength than you can when you lie down. So I'm also kind of looking at this world of getting this more serratus involvement by doing more standing related press work opposed to lying down on a bench for throwing athletes. So you got to have a combination. Everything's a mix.
Well, I think the hard thing we do, and where the challenge there is that you're going to have a lot more kinetic chain involvement in your movement. So it's more you're
stable.
Like, okay, wait, stabilize this.
You got stable.
So you're going to have to constantly be picking to make sure you're actually activating that straightest, because you might be like activating your hip, to get to what you want to do.
But this is good. This is the conversation we need to have. One term that irritates me now more than ever, I still can't stand it in baseball. It's like he's my SC coach, right? But the S and C is strength and conditioning. Strength and conditioning coach. But in the world of high performance, we need to consider ourselves in this area of the field as strength and coordination, right?
Oh, yeah.
The greatest transfer of training is not uniplanar movement, flexion, extension. Basically the body doesn't change its positions. It doesn't have to stabilize. We don't give it a lot of proprioception. We need more coordination.
Yeah, more
personally,
complex training.
Like 70% of my training is unilateral.
Yeah.
And then when you break it down, 70% on top of that is in split stance.
Yeah.
Right? For myself, for throwing athletes, the other thing too is being more ipsilateral. So when I do, it's tough to see me, I think, but when I do rotations, I always like putting the active arm, the leg first, because I want to be in a hip lock position. That means that I'm working into a row pattern that promotes separation. I notice a lot of your drills, that's a big feature. So for me, I agree with that. The athletes, it's not just getting an athlete to have range of motion and rotation. They have to have the motor control and the stability to do that, and we need to activate, especially behind their scap retractors, their rhomboids. We need to get those things active as they're pulling, and that helps.
Totally with you. I think you got to start simple and you got to go to complex. And I love the criticism with complex lifting is it's dangerous, it's too hard. I'm like, well, isn't that the same thing with a complex skill? So why wouldn't we want to address the things that make it dangerous so it's less dangerous in the training environment? So then when we go to the skill and the competitive environment, we've already worked through those weaknesses.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. So, when I first started in baseball at the major league level, at the minor league level, I was with the Cardinals. There was you could not think about Olympic lifting. That was not a thing. And then I went to the Orioles. We bought everybody lifting shoes
that was
from Adidas.
what,
2012.
Brady Anderson.
Yep. And so when we got there, we all stayed together and we said, okay, how can we develop a process by which athletes can enter this Olympic lifting realm? Again, now we're getting closer to strength and coordination, hinge, elasticity, speed,
Multi-joint.
speed, strength, multi-joint.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, we had to look at the athlete. Like, for example, you'll see pitchers that have their arm outstretched. You'll know which throwing arm it is because you'll see a contracture. Like if I'm a right-handed pitcher, this one's going to be bent more. They just have, a lot of bone fragments in there. They have osteophytes that they can't, and they have tightness in their muscle.
I also find
they can't
it's
bend.
fatigue. This is probably fatigue.
It could be
I think it's, to be honest, I think it's a lot of tricep fatigue.
it's a combination.
Or in weakness.
It's a combination, but you see these athletes, they might not be able to catch at the front. They might be like this, right? They might get extreme flexion here, but they're locked here. So the catch is going to be hard, but that doesn't mean that you can't create
but
other...
I go and fix that issue. Like, I try to deal with that issue. A lot of times I find is when I start building their shoulder strength and their arm strength, it goes away. I find a lot of that is linking to fatigue and weakness.
It can.
But the point is, you're right. But
you got to adapt.
Right,
you got to adapt.
You're nailing something I talk about all the time. Here's the thing. if we had this conversation in most, I think, high-level organizations talking about how do we deal with athletes that run into limitations, restrictions in the weight room for baseball players, I think the status quo is, we pull back. Immediately, we pull back, we find an alternate route.
Yep.
That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, we're building elite athletes that we already have a pattern of injury. They're breaking down on the field. If we run into any weakness in the weight room, when is the better time to fix the problem?
Right.
You
But
know?
I will say, I want to comment on that, because one of the issues with this is that Major League Baseball, when you talk about Major League Baseball, probably most college programs too, they can be understaffed. You know, for example, if you're in the minor league level, there's one strength coach and there's 25 guys. It is not set up as well as it could be for that kind of individual attention.
No, I get it. Plus, it's an in-season environment.
But the thing is like, this is where, and this is huge, is where the pro coach and the private, specialist, they work together, and you communicate and say, hey, in season, we gave our guys a real detailed report with the Angels. I mean, every kid walked out, they had metrics that they had to accomplish. They were given a report of what needs to be improved upon for the things like, you're talking about, that goes to this specialist, that we can have that dialogue and say, hey, has that been fixed? We notice as athletes losing internal rotation in their hips, it's really sticky. He needs to get a lot of work there. We use mobility sticks, it didn't work. We talk about, we got to be humble. Like, not everything we do is going to work.
Yeah.
Maybe not everything you do is going to work, but
yeah.
together,
Yeah.
it can happen. But it's just not set up in a place, I feel, to attack things like that. So what happens, like what you say, is that there's a path of least resistance. So I'm saying in this particular case, guy can't front catch. Okay, he can't hold a front rack because he's got this.
Can't,
well, I know, but the thing, there's no time, right?
Where you
so
are, yeah.
You need to get a training session.
right.
And I kind of laugh when I see this in pro ball, when they get a new coach, especially at the major league level, and they put out this program that's got 12 exercises, right? It's got multi-layers, there's supersetting. I mean, you're gonna wear these dudes out. You literally, if you're a great strength coach in Major League Baseball, you can get it done in under 20 minutes. And even less. You gotta talk to the player. Some players I work with, they wanted to even be there for 10 minutes. They said, hey, we don't wanna be there very long. You got 10 minutes every day with me. I will come in for 10 minutes. I am not hanging out longer than that. And you gotta be really focused. And sometimes you have to take the path of least resistance. For example, in this particular case, this would be a pull-only athlete.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, but you're talking about in not a perfect world, or not in an optimal environment.
It's funny you say that, right?
Yeah.
We got multi-million-dollar athletes,
And you're not.
and you're not in an optimal environment. It just isn't. I mean, you're gonna laugh. You should talk about this because you can comment in there.
On strength and conditioning, I'm a pitching
Pitching
coach.
side,
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
same everywhere.
Yeah, I
though.
mean, it's the same. Yeah, you got one pitching coach. A lot of times there's 12 active on the roster, but there's really like 27 guys there that you're having to monitor and make sure the throwing programs are going well. Or you have a coordinator overseeing 115 pitchers, and he's trying to spread himself thin. So it's understaffing when it comes down to it. And then we wonder why, well, this guy's, induced vertical break is dropped. It's like, well, that one guy who was supposed to be monitoring that was actually taking his week-long vacation that they get with the organization, or 5-day vacation, and it happened over that time frame. So the guy who was filling in was like, hey, I'm just here to keep the ship going forward, and he doesn't know those guys because he's filling in for somebody else, and these small little things fall through the cracks. So just little tiny things of the understaffing, and people always expect the care to get better as you progress, but that's why everyone usually does have a private coach, is because there's just not enough people to handle all those bodies when it comes down to it.
You're right. Next question. I think
There's some questions up there?
What does it say? I just saw one. Let's see.
I did see one.
Oh yeah, I got it. The questions section. I don't think. See, nobody uses.
No,
these.
they're
Why do they allow you to have?
There's a couple that were being texted.
You have a comments, but then
Oh, there's one.
do 90-90 drills on the ground help with hip mobility? You know these, right? Where you,
Yeah.
Where you go like this and you flip it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So for me, I use mobility sticks. I'm not going to plug a company that's not mine, but that.
sticks you like trigger points.
So they're actually a big, long orange,
haven't seen them.
orange staff. It's like a staff, right? But what I do, it's like a car. If you're kind of jack it up, I would put it over my thigh and underneath the inside of my ankle, and I would use my own to do some TNF stretching.
Right.
I think 90-90 works for sure, but there has to be, in the mobility process, activation and relaxation. I think you need to turn down muscles, and it's like anything. If let's just say I'm trying to stretch my pec and I go in a doorway. The one thing I need to do is activate the pec going forward, get it active, and then when I'm going to stretch, I need to get the back of my shoulder as active as possible so it turns it down.
I think it all links to the Golgi tendon, or how do you say it? Is it
Golgi tendon?
Golgi tendon?
Yeah.
You think it links to that because that tendon is I mean, that part of the tendon is a neurological. It's receiving a neurological impulse, right? That.
Yeah, the Golgi tendon, but I think that's more force generating. But you're talking about the spindles, the muscle spindles, which tell you about length.
What I'm saying is the Golgi tendon releases a lot of the tension in the spindles, right? It's a part of the mechanism to prevent like an overloading through like,
right, exactly.
So, but the point is, I feel like when you do a stretch and you go into activation, you're almost desensitizing that to allow more.
Yeah, we call that reciprocal inhibition. It's like one muscle turns on, the other one has to turn off, or we'd be like a rigid statue. We wouldn't be able to move anywhere.
Right, so because that's the point. We were just talking about Jimmy today.
Yeah, poor Jimmy.
Gravity's been destroying his bones.
Over.
And it's ironic gravity's been destroying his bones is because he doesn't have muscles. That's what muscles do. The muscle activation keeps the body functional and healthy, right?
Yeah. One thing for this particular person who posted this about the hip mobility, you can look at hip flows. A lot of people put hip flows on YouTube. They're really good. That basically goes into continuous movement to improve mobility while there is stabilization. It's not always best to lie on the ground and do some type of flexibility. It's important, I think, to have a little bit of muscle activation in there and PNF stretching components. So those are some things you could look up. Hip flows. There's so many. People have a lot of them to improve mobility.
Coach in red.
Can't hear.
Oh yeah, man. A lot of people on here, but having time to find questions. Anybody have any questions? Let me know. Anybody want to get on? Let's see. We did have somebody here. I think they came on a long time ago, though. Oh, we have somebody new. Let's try it. Hey, we're letting. We sent the request. Let's see if he comes on.
Yeah, pop on here.
Pop on if you want to talk to us,
man.
I'll let you in.
All right, we got somebody.
Can we hear though? That's the challenge. Can you hear? It's probably coming through the. Hey, can you say check? Give me the remote. We might have to take you off it up there. Hold on a second. Technical difficulty here. I think we can hear you now.
You say something?
You got a question? Can you hear us? I can hear you speak Spanish. We might have Spanish. We might have to get in here, Alex. We heard him for a second. You have a question? Can you hear us?
We got you.
What's your question?
My question is how to put more velocity.
Tú puedes hacer la pregunta en español también.
Sí, perfecto.
Dale.
There we go. Translator's in.
O sea, siempre me mantengo constante en 90 millas.
Ajá.
Y no logro 30.000 millas más allá. Pues me dicen que mi problema es que dejo el brazo atrás y no encuentro manera cómo mantenerme, o sea, cómo hacer que mi salida sea mejor, pues.
Okay, él
Me
dice.
dicen que mi único problema es mi brazo que está atrás.
Okay, he said like he is constantly at 90 miles per hour, but he's not able to improve that, and people are saying like he's dragging the arm. So what's the recommendation?
How old is he? Ask him.
¿Cuántos años tú tienes?
Yo tengo 20.
20.
20 years old.
20. Well, I mean, you're at a good age. We plateau in velocity when the body stops changing. So if you get to a point in your life when you're young, you're growing, right? You gain more weight each year. Sometimes your bones grow. Your body starts to fill out. You start to gain strength. Your body goes through different stages where it produces more hormones for growth and strength. And all those years of changing and growing, you typically see those who are lucky, they see their velocity go with it. But then you get to a point where you stop that. Your body starts to slow down. It's not changing as much. And that's what I typically link plateaus to with velocity, is when your body's not really changing. So this is where you start to get more disciplined and get into a training program that is going to help you create more power change, strength change. Let me just finish up. You can shorten it to it. Or mobility change or biomechanical change. And then now your body starts changing again through the training, and now your velocity goes up.
Yeah, that's dragging.
Yeah, so His arms is dragging
let
over.
me try to translate it. ¿Tú me puedes escuchar a mí? Él dice que lo que sucede es que... Pero, ¿me puedes escuchar a mí ahora? Ok, él dice que lo que pasa es que el crecimiento y el desarrollo como pelotero va relacionado a la edad. Entonces llega un momento en el que ya con la edad, ya tú entras en una especie como de plateau, como que ya tú no sigues subiendo, pero que también es recomendable tú entrenar apropiadamente y encontrar el programa que sea adecuado para tu mecánica. Entonces, por lo que podemos ver ahí en la pantalla, realmente tú estás arrastrando el brazo, entonces eso también te puede traer problemas en el hombro, problemas en el codo.
One of the things, so I just want to jump in for this particular.
I told him like if he like he's showing, he's dragging the arm. Say. Okay. I was telling him like he's obviously showing like he's dragging the arm, so that's gonna cause like shoulder and elbow issues. So he's saying like he has elbow issues.
Yeah, so if he can see this dynamometer, this would be something very important to make sure that his arm's very strong. You know, if it's lagging, it doesn't matter how a pitcher throws, they're always going to have some element of weakness that they have to correct. But the other thing, and maybe Jordan, you might agree with me, that causes some arm drag when you're not looking at the body is actually the timing. For example, if you're very slow to get into foot strike, that's a problem. I think you mentioned to me that an athlete has to go from pickup to foot down in under a second. Maybe he has that on slow motion.
Entonces, mira, algo que puede suceder es, primero, tú puedes usar esta herramienta, es ArmCare. Tú puedes usar herramientas para que te determine qué tan fuerte o cuáles son tus áreas débiles. Eso es número uno. Y número dos, también él dice que puede ser un problema de timing. En el timing de la mecánica, tú estás haciendo una cosa más rápido que la otra, por lo que está provocando que tu brazo sea arrastrado.
Tell him thank you.
Muchas gracias, brother.
Mi ángulo... muchas gracias.
A ti.
Real quick on that, Brent. One thing I've noticed is when guys have that late arm, they're dragging the arm. I notice if it's not a timing issue, it's typically going to be something with the sequence, the kinetic chain, the kinematic sequence.
But you made a good point because you did a study on it where it if the time into front foot was lengthened, the arm typically had more time to get into position. When it was shortened, it had less time.
Yep.
So I would say drag occurs in a shorter stride because you're quicker to start with trunk rotation. But the point is, you know, that's on the averages. You're still going to see people that can go into a short stride and still separate. Because to me, separation, hip to shoulder separation, House talked about, you know, discovered hip to shoulder separation. Hip to shoulder separation is your ability to delay your trunk while you're driving your hips. So what hip to shoulder separation is a counter movement. It's basically saying it's when you separate your hips and shoulders, you now have time to create power without rushing your upper body. That's all hip to shoulder separation is. Here, create power in lower half without rushing your body, meaning your upper body stays back. And the more you separate it, the more power you got and the more time you gave it to translate. But you get into the rush or you drag the arm when the trunk is coming before the arm cocks.
For sure.
You got to get this up before rotation. If not, we're going to be hyperangulated. We're going to be delayed
100%.
in that position. But
That's a great point because I see that too. A lot of people talk about arm path in pitchers and they look at it and, you know, they see pictures of a guy like that and they go, ooh. You know, instantly it's like, oh my God, his arm's going to blow off. But the thing is exactly what you said. If he is not opening early and he's closed and that arm has time, he's kind of where everybody else is. He's staying closed before he's getting opening. And generally, like if you want to put a number to it and you're looking at biomechanics, at foot contact, usually the guys that have lower stress to the arm and also have more deception, they have about 10 degrees of counter rotation at foot contact. They're still held back. You'll see some other guys that are even, right? They're starting to open. You'll see some other guys that kind of roll through. They don't stop, and you can see a lot of their letters at foot contact. And
well, one of the studies that they actually looked at the inverted W or early trunk rotators, and I've always been, you know, on the boat of early trunk rotation. To me, like, I think Job even said most arms are destroyed through early trunk rotation.
Yeah, man.
And in this one study, it found really no correlation to inverted W's. Here's the thing with the inverted W. Your elbows above your shoulder is fine until you land and your body's ready to stabilize and accelerate. If your elbows are still up at that point, you're going to have some impingement issues.
Probably not throwing any strikes either, so you're probably not on the mound to begin with.
But there's a lot of big leaguers that found a way to do it. They never stayed healthy. But the point is early trunk rotation is the culprit. So when I see good kids going to landing, I'd love for them to still be here. Not many are. Some of them are starting the process. But if I see a guy landing like this, there's no way he's going to throw hard. And if he is, he's hyperangulating, or he's dragging his arm so bad to delay that his arm's going to rip off.
Okay,
We have some stuff on that we filmed real early on about fixing that arm path and how most of it's going to be the timing of the trunk and then what you're doing with the strength to support that as well. So couldn't agree more.
Well, the reason the arm blows out in those positions is because you have a plate here to protect anything going this way. You don't have a plate here protecting it going that way. So it's way more vulnerable this way. Why are you smiling?
So I wanted to talk about this because you're talking about the glove arm too. So remember, I was saying about rowing with athletes, any kind of like single arm row, even standing, or if you're even going to be on a bench. A lot of the athletes, throwing athletes, many of them, they want to get to an acceleration position to row. So that means if I'm right-handed thrower, my left foot's forward and I'm rowing this way, okay? But when I watch guys row, you can't really see my hips, but as they're rowing, there's a lot of
They're going together.
Yeah,
So
there's uni like it's like a uniaxial rotation. Everything goes together. But for me, I'm more about having that other foot forward to block the hips. And the other thing that allows me to do is when the athlete rows, it kind of simulates that glove arm. I mean, you really want to teach the athlete to be able to close. So when I do rowing, I allow a lot of rotation. And the other thing too, when you got a lot of tension and you're in this rowing position, you can take some big breaths in and out and expire all your air, and you can find you're getting like 1 or 2 degrees more range of motion in a strength activity that helps with that separation.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. I think that allows the pitcher, hopefully those watching, you're realizing that when you're training for pitching,
Oh,
you're not
someone
just
wants a
throwing.
live video with us.
Yeah, I'll do it. We'll hit you, Matt. A lot of people, I think when they think about training, they think I got to throw every day. No, you can be in a rowing exercises and working on your pitching mechanics. I think that's what's
Strength
the
and
best way to-
coordination,
yeah.
buddy. That's it, strength and coordination.
Here you go, Matt. Let's bring Matt on right here. See if he comes in. We just added you in, Matt. I'm always nervous when I'm letting people in.
What are we going to get?
What's going on? It's like,
Is he coming in?
it's like a birthday
Oh,
party.
somebody's coming.
No, I hit Matt. Hit it again. I hit Matt.
No, it's not. It's probably not online right now.
Oh, he might have jumped
If
off.
you want to do the other guy, do the other guy.
Was there someone else?
There's someone else.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how people think about this, in terms of
Well, look, here's
their
the
own
thing.
training
When you did your
process.
slide and you said 5% is vital.
Oh, here's somebody.
All right, Alex, you're back on.
¿Español o inglés?
Hola, no se ve.
Sí, dímelo.
Dímelo una.
¿Cuál es tu pregunta?
Una recomendación para el hombro, tengo como algo que me duele.
He has 1 year with the shoulder pain. A recommendation for him.
Okay, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things going there.
Déjame ver que te voy a dar una recomendación.
What plane does he have pain in? Going this way? Or if he put his thumb up out in front of his body, could he raise his arm?
Okay, si tú pones tu brazo
Right
así.
in front of the body?
Si tú pones tu brazo
No.
así.
Not, is it this way, this way?
¿De qué forma te duele? ¿Cuando lo pones para el lado o cuando lo pones para el frente?
So in terms of raising the arm in front of the body or to the side, which one causes him more pain?
Déjame verlo. ¿De frente entonces?
Okay.
Hold on a second. Let me. Ok, mírame aquí en la cámara un momento. Mírame la cámara un momento. Mírame la cámara un momento. Escúchame. Si tú pones el brazo así, ¿te duele así o te duele cuando tú lo haces así, de lado? Trata eso un momento. Ponte así. Okay, you say it like that way.
Okay. So,
Okay.
That's bicep.
oh yeah. So to me, there is a mobility issue, but this is why we need to know the strength of the athletes, because there are some kind of muscular deficiency that's affecting his ability to maybe upwardly rotate his scapula, or he might not have enough strength in certain planes. So, one of the things he should be doing is having something to assess like that, maybe contacting, Brent or whoever's working with him to be able to get more of the individualized programming.
Yeah.
That could be super
the
helpful.
challenge with a lot of the guys from Dominican, they don't have the money. So, I mean, I'm going to recommend this just like I'm going to recommend TopVelocity, but when they can't afford us, I usually say, what he's saying is strength. You need to get stronger. What I'm saying is the same, and then there's more mechanics after that we should work on. But most important, you're weak. A lot of these young Dominican boys are they're too weak. They got to be doing a lot more upper body strengthening. I mean, carry anything.
Let me
Get strong enough to carry logs over your head. I don't know, man. We can find a way, right?
Ellos están diciendo que hay un problema de debilidad en la parte del hombro, pero que a ciencia cierta no se puede decir de esa forma a menos de que tú tengas una evaluación. Entonces, un aparato como este,
There's someone else there.
si tú estás viendo un aparato como este, te puede evaluar más o menos, pero es difícil decirlo sin una evaluación concreta.
Yeah.
So I always just go to here, go to what we do, and then say, if you don't have that strength, give them some basics, right?
We got someone else?
Yeah.
It's like Barkley's back.
It's Johnny Vilo.
Oh, yeah,
Who's Johnny Vilo?
I don't know. But
Sounds like he throws hard.
He follows Rotax.
Johnny Vilo.
Johnny Vilo.
Johnny Vilo, you going to talk to us? He must be throwing hard.
There's people saying hi from Italy.
All right,
Oh, nice.
Italy.
That's cool.
Yeah, let's go to Italy.
Is this Johnny Vilo?
What's going on, boys?
How's it going, man?
I got a quick question for y'all.
Yeah.
How important is stride length in regards to velocity?
There you
Oh,
go.
man.
This is Ryan's study stuff
I
right here.
studied it for years, and I will tell you, at a young age, it matters. Okay, there is a big difference at a young age. Once the athlete hits about high school, it really doesn't matter in terms of velocity, but it does in terms of load. And that's why we look at ground reaction force. So one of the athletes that just got on here was talking about shoulder pain and his arm dragging, and we had an internal discussion about whether a shorter stride or a longer stride is better. And obviously we got to think about if our stride shortens, right? We lose lower body power, we lose ground reaction force to achieve a stride length that's suitable. We're going to have to make up for it with higher degrees of rotation. The athlete doesn't become linear, they have to spin to create that rotation. So one of the simple rules, you got some simple heuristics, but the athlete should probably have at least their body height in stride length. Okay, so if they were to lie down on the mound and you put a tape where their head is, they should be able to get there. And if they can't, there's some mobility issues, there's also some strength issues. But that doesn't mean that that is optimal. I'm just saying that that's going to give them the most time. The key is, and I know I work for a company, so does Jordan, that we look at arm strength, is that however you throw, you still need to know that where your arm strength's at. So you're going to find guys that are really whippy. They got a real short stride length. They don't drag their back foot. They want to pick it up. They want to rotate. They want nothing left behind. They're going everything that they can into their lead leg. And you got to make sure that those guys have really strong arms, because those are the guys that could have that leg. You got that really fast opening in the trunk, and then your arm's still behind you. So you have to make sure that arm strength, I think, is paramount. Doesn't matter the stride length, when you get to a certain level.
The point is, if what you're trying to do is increase their stride length to get them to throw harder, if they don't have the upper body strength to receive all the energy trying to crank up their body, then you're gonna run into issue. So that's the way to think about it. My fair way to understand stride length. Go ahead. Did I cut you off? Do you have anything else you were saying? Let me give you one. Let me give you one more way to think of it. I always think of stride length because it gives you the importance of a stride length. It's really two things. It gives you time, but you have to use that time to create more acceleration. So if you go to add time or distance and you can't create acceleration, that's where stride length can hurt you. So I like to use the runway analogy. So like, for example, if you had 2 runways and 2 F-18 jets, F-18s have to go about 165 miles an hour to come off the ground. If this runway had 300 feet and this runway had 1,500 feet, who's getting off the ground? It's the 1,500 foot, because that's the amount of time that they need. That F-18 needs at least 1,500 feet for those engines to get to full acceleration. So if I'm a pitcher and I'm trying to get to 95, there's a certain amount of time my force production needs so I can generate that much speed out of my hand. So there's a distance requirement there. I mean, and ideally, it's not just in your stride. It's in your delay. It's in your forward trunk. It's in your external rotation. The distance keep going, but you still got to think of your stride length like the F-18. You got to go, okay, I want to go far, but I got to go fast. For example, if I had a prop engine plane barely gets off the ground at 140, and it needs 2,000 feet, well, who gives a crap if I got 3,000? that added, like stride another foot doesn't matter if you can barely stride 6 feet or 5 feet. So you got to understand stride length, just like any increase of distance in your body, has to be an application for you to move faster. So if you go to increase distance and you can't move faster, it has no value to it. It might even hurt you.
One of the things too on that, have you ever looked at your athlete's ankles or your own if you're competing? Do you ever?
He is an athlete.
Yeah. Do you look at your ankle mobility? Because another thing that has to happen for you to develop a good stride length, you have to create friction with the mound. That's what allows you to create force. So if you don't have very good dorsiflexion, that's a problem. Restricted plantar flexion, where you're pointing your toes down, so toes up, toes down, that's a problem. If you don't have good rotation, we call that inversion, eversion, you need to have that happen. And then when you're pitching, your feet kind of corkscrew. So as you're going down the mound, your foot is actually grinding out because your shin is rotating forward. Yeah, you got an internal rotation of your shin. It's starting to roll towards home plate while your foot's still in contact with the ground. So you need great ankle mobility. I believe all throwing athletes need great ankle mobility to create friction, because if you lose the friction, you're not going to have the ground reaction force. You're not going to be able to get out a long enough stride, and then you're not going to have a really fast delivery, which is also helpful. You need speed into foot contact.
Any last questions?
No, man, you guys are awesome. I appreciate all the tips that you guys are doing, man.
Hey man, appreciate it. Thanks for coming on and keep following us.
No doubt.
I'm gonna put a challenge on you. So we got this we got this AI, right? And what I love about bringing in any type of statistical analysis into your practice is that it challenges you, right? Mm-hmm. You got a lot of theories in your head. Here they go. Here comes the test, right? So we put the AI in, and the guy Joey, who does the AI, calls me up one day and he goes, "Brent, there's a real weird correlation in here. I don't know what to do with it." He goes, "There's a high correlation to velocity and the loss of plantar flexion." And dude, I got theories. I want to hear your theory. Literally, it shows a high correlation to the loss of plantar flexion.
What foot? Both? Okay, so this is my take on it, all right? We know that the end point of creating maximum force, they don't create maximum force. Athletes don't until almost mid-flight, like of the center of mass. You know, you don't get max force when you just, you're moving.
Yeah, right.
It's like, as joints are extending,
right?
So that little bit, that extra force that's produced, either it's vertical or it's away from the body, so horizontal, that has to happen for plantar flexion, right? That's the thing that's so weird about pitching. And I see this, and I have conversations with a lot of different people in the pitching world, and they talk about pitchers either being aerial, that are more toe
I've been
dominant,
hearing that word
or
lately.
they're more terrestrial. They like to sit.
Yeah.
The thing is that people have to understand is that even if you try to keep your heel into the ground the whole time, you're still plantar flexing, right? And the key is, if we lose plantar flexion, doesn't matter if you're kind of like a drop and drive pitcher or you're really tall, as you come out of it, you're going to lose force. But when we look at, okay, if this is my stride foot, right? The way I hit, whether it's toe down, so that's an aerial pitcher, or if it's going to be heel down or flat foot, I might be more terrestrial. When I hit, one of the things that has to happen to create bracing is I have to go into plantar flexion while my foot's on the ground. Front and back foot. Yeah, back foot's got a plantar flex to get a lot of ground reaction force. It's like that end point. But the front foot, you have to be able to push back on yourself.
Yeah.
If you go into dorsiflexion, so if my toes, as my foot's in the ground, if my knee's going closer to my toes, that's dorsiflexion and closed chain. If I'm starting to do that, I'm not bracing.
Yeah.
I'm leaking a lot of energy. So I have to be able to go in. I got to be able to rigid. You got to have a lot of plantar flexion, and you got to be able to hold it.
Yeah.
That's going to cause you to be a real, like a stick in the ground, like a pole vaulter.
Well, I also thought of it, and I think you nailed it. I thought too, like there was a study I saw on high jumpers, and the only thing that adapted in the body in the study when they had them just high jumping and then a control group not, and why their high jump went up was because their Achilles tendon on their right leg, their jumping leg, thickened. Mm-hmm. It's the only adaptation when you just jump. So I thought maybe there's something going where it's not a thickening, because this is just an initial measurement, but it could be those with left plantar flexion might have thicker Achilles, which might be able to help them spring more power or be more stable in the joint.
Possibly. I think one of the good interconnections that you should make with the data, talking about the plantar flexion, is now connect it to functional power, like a vertical jump.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because
Yeah, see
I'm
if it's driving
yeah,
out.
I'm assuming you would see that direction of force characteristic, right? Our plantar flexion, I mean, our foot is the beginning and the be all and everything. Nobody cares about the feet in pitchers. So we're always looking at the arm and rotation, but the feet are giving us the direction of force,
Yeah,
right?
Well, it's a force. They're force couples too, pumping the energy in.
Right, and the vertical jump will tell you somewhat, you know, if you had force plates, you could measure things like the stiffness about the muscles, about the Achilles and certain things related to that foot position. But I do think, you know, the plantar flexion is important, but even dorsiflexion, some athletes, when they load, they may load more quad dominant. I've seen a lot of good pitchers, I'm sure you have too, that are quad dominant. I just...
There's a lot of quad those are good athletes.
Yes. The thing that's kind of hard for me, probably hard for you, I'm going to shut up and let you talk a little bit, is when we try to take too many athletes that are round pegs and stick them in square holes. You know, we think that, you know, here's Jordan, we might look at his body, might look at his pitch, and we'll say, okay, well, you know, that guy's got to be like Cambridge Rosian. And we're gonna use that as the model, but Jordan might have completely opposite anatomical preferences, you know, in the way that he moves. So that's so huge, is to appreciate those differences in people and try to figure out how to optimize those things.
Yeah, I mean, you know, aerial terrestrial has become the new kind of buzzword.
I've been hearing it a lot.
To me, it's just almost rephrasing something that's been around in a new way. So it's not necessarily like generally like a new thought process. It's been around. It's just a quad dominant or a glute dominant loader in the sense.
Pretty much.
And you know, I posted a thing on LinkedIn the other day, and I just wanted to see who would touch it, just to show that there's like individualization that needs to happen, especially the higher level a guy gets. Now, when you're working with someone younger, you're going to have a lot more pliability to work with. They've got less reps on the mileage, there's less on the odometer. You're going to be able to really adjust some of those movement patterns. But as a guy starts getting older, you know, you might get some kids, you know, we have some Latin Americans jumping on here on the call. You might not get a guy until he's 22, 23, and he's never had private coaching before. That movement pattern's ingrained. And if he's a quad dominant loader throwing at 94, 96, and he's got, and this is one of the words I used with Cooper over at Louisiana Tech, was what's acceptable accuracy? What's acceptable K rate? What is acceptable for that athlete? Because if he's performing in the area that we say this is acceptable for what we want, and we change that movement pattern from what he's been doing for 22, 23 years, we might drop him below acceptable.
We might put him into pain.
What's the risk reward of our, what is our projected outcome? And what I like about your AI model is you have a projected outcome of what that risk reward is. So now you can start going at those low hanging fruits where most groups are just going, no, this is the one way I know how to teach. He's going to do that one thing.
Oh yeah.
And we see a lot of times, and I've talked about it before, if you're a really good coach using a blanket program, you're going to hit the bullseye about 50% of the time, which means 50% of your athletes are not getting better. They're either staying the same or getting worse, but 50% are making some type of progress. When you start individualizing, when you start using things like ArmCare, when you start running it through the AI models, when you start hammering those things out, now you improve that to 60%, then to 85%, to 90%. I don't think we'll ever be 100%. I just think there's going to always be some human error in those things, but the closer we can get to that, the better off we're going to be.
I want to ask the people that are here on the live to just give a thumbs up. They can give some kind of, I'd say a thumbs up. Let us know if you're doing the same ArmCare program as someone else. If you're doing the same program as someone else, I'm just curious to see, you know, how everybody who's on there, how general their training really is. So if you know that you and your buddy are doing the same program for your arm strength, that can be a big issue. What's that?
So they're talking about arm circles with balls in their hands. I don't know. It's kind of confusing, but is that a good, would you recommend that as a strengthening exercise?
So one of the things I do, I use a heavy plyo ball. And the only reason, I mean, it's kind of hard to see, is what I do is I call them, they're like pendulum exercises, like an elephant swing. And the weight gives me a little gapping in my shoulder joint to relax it. It gives me a little bit of stretching in that tissue that's safe, okay? But, you know, multiple circles, it's more like a warm-up element.
I wouldn't say it's strengthening.
I wouldn't say it's strengthening. I look at it as mobilization.
Yeah, you're getting blood to a
mobilization. It's rhythmic. That's right. Like, you know, if you're going to do, I mean, I like the arm crank. You know, at Louisiana Tech, where I'm a faculty member, we look at arm crank studies, and Dr. David Zemansky, who's there, is a baseball scientist. he's looking at the aerobic capacity of people doing rhythmic work with their upper body. Okay, puts a lot of blood flow there. But you could do the same kind of thing, you know, with weighted balls. Give yourself a little bit of effort to generate a lot of blood flow. You know, whether you want to do circles, it's got to be continuous, and it's good in some ways because if you go for a jog, let's say, and you're flushing your arm out, the blood's going to go to your legs. Okay, it's not going to go to your arm. Your biggest muscles, when you start moving them, that's where the blood goes. So you got to think about that.
Someone, instead of going to the feed, they just call it.
We froze.
See, it says, don't Tom House have his guys do arm circles?
Yeah, they do arm circles. Yeah, it's part of their warm-up routine. Just like, you know, a lot of the MLB orgs, and you'll see it all kind of everywhere you go. They'll use it as a warm-up.
There's no right or wrong way.
And that's,
you know?
that's what I've always come down to. It's like there's a million ways to skin a cat. You got to find the way that's most efficient for you.
Individualization.
Yeah.
But that's why what we try to do, like that's why the AI is so important and the evaluation is so important, because we could sit here with all camps and talk exercises all day long, but there's got to be an end result. So that's why the evaluation to me is, I'll let anyone debate exercises in my training, but it's harder to debate the evaluations and what we're trying to achieve. What are we trying to get these athletes to become or develop? I think those are the things that it'd be easier for all of us to get the same page on, and then everybody's gonna have their way of getting there. But that's where I throw things out, like also too, when I hear a lot of the conventional wisdom, I want to challenge the conventional wisdom by going, well, what's the end result there? Are we aware of it? For example, there's a study that showed the distraction forces of releasing a pitch at a high velocity was up to 140% of your body weight.
Yeah.
If I'm 200 pounds, that's almost a 300-pound man hanging on my arm. How is anything not nearly close to that weight going to help me build that kind of strength? Like, how is a 20-pound tubing, a 2-pound ball, how are those reps and loads going to help me endure 140% of my body weight every time I release a pitch? That's what blows my mind.
I got some. So this dynamometer, there's a feature on it called the strength tester. What we want to do is, you may not be able to recreate, obviously, that force that you have to decelerate, but what you can recreate is the activation, the muscular recruitment. If you guys aren't doing isometrics in your ArmCare programming, if you're not doing max contraction, pushing against something, if you're not doing yielding isometrics, those are things that I think are so important that you need to have in your program. You know, and we wear it. We test like this. Your test is actually training, but we also have a training function.
But they're really weak in scapation or one of those. Is it
Isometrics.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, isometrics. So you're telling me? I guess I missed the part. We got distracted. That is helping you do the isometric work.
So what the isometrics do, right? So this is a real big conversation between maximum strength and maximum recruitment, right? If we did a manual muscle test, some of our rotator cuff muscles, our serratus too, are going to be active at more than 100% of a manual muscle test. So when we throw, you're going to have more activation. That doesn't necessarily say force, okay? But the mechanics of force, we're looking at, you know, what are the loads that you have to use around your shoulder so your arm doesn't fly off, essentially. Like, yeah, they're way over body weight. So, but we have to get to a point where we are teaching our muscles how to activate and co-contract. I wish I had a slow-mo video of it, and I'm gonna just show here on the camera. If you watch a pitcher in super slow motion, we're talking Edgertronic camera, and you watch it from the inside, as they go to throw, and you just watch their elbow, you'll see at a point where their elbow just kind of does this. You're not gonna see a lot of hand movement. There is a point in the delivery, in external rotation, where there's no motion. It's only isometric. That's when everything's so recruited.
The conversion of external to internal.
Yeah, it's a point where we're taking the slack out of everything.
Yeah, right.
We're setting the catapult, and then bang. And a lot of times athletes do not have very good isometric strength. And we test that. We see when a guy pushes into something, we're like, whoa, he can't do 20% of his body weight pushing forward, and he can't do 20% pushing back. He's got a weak shoulder. We got to fix that stuff.
And how do we fix it?
We fix it, isometrics. Now there's other components too. Overhead strength, I want to get in my gear and train with these guys here to show them some things, but doing a lot of overhead carries, that's another thing too. It doesn't have to be super heavy. You don't have to press super heavy, but being able to handle, you know, a barbell and plates, something that you can do. Heavier kettlebell, overhead, you see a lot of farmers carries, okay? Farmers carries don't have, in my opinion, as much of a transfer of training effect on throwing athletes. We play and perform above our shoulder, okay? But a lot of the programming is done below the shoulder. So that's important too, is like, you know, our carry work, our upper body work is also gonna help too with the activation.
I mean, what I like to do with overhead stuff is, I love the overhead carries. I do like to start off, light, but progress over time to something close to your body weight overhead. I just feel comfortable with an athlete. If he can, and it built up to this, it takes a long time. If he could hold and stabilize and maintain for, 10 seconds or more his body weight over his head, it's a good assessment that he's got good overhead strength to resist those 140% of his body weight forces. I'm not saying it's a necessity. I just think if I have an athlete for 2-3 years, that as a coach, that I would like to get him to that in 2 to 3 years. That's definitely not something I'm trying to do in a year.
Yeah.
That's something I want to do as I mature an athlete through this training.
It is undeniable how important being able to have strength over your head is. I mean, there's just nothing around it. When I first started coaching, and I won't name names of someone who supervised me with a major league team, it was really frowned upon. They did not want pitchers to do anything over their shoulder level. This is as high as you could go. Okay, now we know biomechanically, just what Brent said, the loads when you're releasing a ball are more than your body weight. Okay, so it doesn't make sense that you're competing at way higher level than you're training. So that makes sense to me in terms of a progressive overload fashion of training more overhead strength. And that's why I love different handstand progressions.
Yeah.
I can't say it enough.
Good question for Jordan on top of that, because you brought it up really well. What do these players do if their coaches keep telling them they can't lift overhead? So we're going to put the hard stuff on there.
Give me that one. I mean, I've had a lot of that happen. I mean, there was organizations, again, I won't say that still don't allow overhead lifting. There's a couple out there. I have guys playing in some organizations that still won't let guys.
What do you do?
You try to have a conversation with them, ideally, and I start hammering out more eccentric work in planes that are going to be okay with their org. That's usually my go-to to try to help a guy out. You may have a better answer than that, because I mean, if doing something overhead is going to get you yelled at and released, I'm going to start hammering out more eccentric.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is it's an educational gap.
Do you think I'm on the right track with that?
I think you're on the right track, but we have to get our athletes more to wanting to do overhead exercise.
Well, here's the thing, it's not that the athlete doesn't want to, it's they're being told they're not allowed to.
Right. And then they're scared to death. The younger ones are scared to death.
So this is known, okay, in the history of sports science. Weight training injuries, out of any sport activity that an athlete could do, and this is why we had to talk to our front offices when we had Olympic lifts, because they were worried about all the banging and clanging when we were getting guys to drop weights.
I mean, we were trying to nap, dude.
Well, actually, it keeps you healthier dropping weight.
So yeah, exactly. So we had to show them that the percentage of injuries that happen with weightlifting are super small, and the reason being is that all injuries, at least in baseball, are acceleration driven.
Right.
Okay, high speed lengthening is what causes tearing.
Right.
All right, not slow speed. If you have a heavier mass, you can't lift it as fast. It's protective. You can't accelerate to the point where things are going to bust. Now, you can have compression injuries, like if you're squatting really heavy and the back's not ready for it, or you progress an athlete too soon. That's a problem, right? But by and large, training overhead, especially with weight that can be handled, right? That you look on a player's face. Personally, if a player doesn't grimace or wince, I don't feel like the load is appropriate to a point where they're conditioned. I mean, an early age athlete, you don't want to stress that much, but a college guy who has a good amount of strength and, they're doing, let's say, dumbbell presses, and, they're looking at you like they're playing poker.
Yeah, right.
It's just, to me, it's like, you need to squeeze a lot more out of the juice. That's huge. It's even in ArmCare. And I'm not going to name names about different products, but we make a band, Crossover Symmetry. I want to talk to you about it. Okay, I'm not talking about other people's. We have a band that goes with our dynamometer that you grip a handle. All right. And when I watch people use our Crossover Symmetry bands, they go from 3 pounds to 40 pounds. They're a training band. They have to grip that band. You have to get more activation on your shoulder. And I look at the faces. Okay. If their face isn't grimacing with any other band, that's rehabilitation to me. That's rehab, okay? That's not enough of a stimulus to make your arms strong. We need to have strong arms. We need to create a culture. That's what I love about TopVelocity. It's highly competitive. If you guys are in this room, there's leaderboards everywhere. There's chalkboard here, chalkboard there. Everybody has taken notes on who is the man in this facility, okay? And we have to do that for arm strength. It has to be a priority. We need to make sure our arms are stronger than other people's, because you're going to take someone else's lunch money. You're going to stay on the field. You're going to take their opportunities.
Real quick on that, talking about, obviously, we didn't even come close to answering the question of what do you do when they won't let you do overhead stuff. But
We got
to educate. Yeah, we got to ask me on that. So, with that, I just filmed something that hasn't been put out yet, so pay attention for it. It'll come out on our YouTube channel. But I have a guy that I'm working with that I've been tracking from spring training all the way up through the trade deadline. It's one of the guys I'm working with. He started out on a team that's not very good. And in spring training, he was roughly like 130 pounds of total strength. And the whole goal is not to finish the season where you left off. The whole goal is to get better as you go. So I'm tracking him over the season, adjusting throwing, adjusting training, and doing all these other things, and he's continually rising as he's going. He ends up at the trade deadline going from the worst to one of the best teams in the league, purely because he's refusing to be mediocre as the season goes. And the only way to do that is you have to track the strength. You have to be willing to stress yourself during the season, in season. Not as much as the off season, but you have to lift overhead. You have to lift, you have to train, you have to do things that are not conventional wisdom a lot of the times. You got to push your body and gain that strength, because he's gaining velo as the season goes. You're gaining strength, you're gaining performance, and we talked about stride length earlier. If you're going to make a mechanical adjustment, you need the strength that's there to maintain that adjustment. A lot of younger kids, they'll get a mechanical adjustment down in a day, they come back the next day and it looks like they've never walked before. It's because they're just not strong enough to repeat. And that's where it comes down to, a lot of the overhead pressing. You need to be willing to get in there and do that. And if your organization, your team won't let you do it, have the conversation. You got to have a conversation. And then for me, if it's just like a hard and fast no, there's going to be no budging on it, start doing eccentrics. It's hard to debate eccentrics,
Here's something for you kids, that are out there. Put in Google, .com/scholar. It is the repository of all research data. You could tell them, your coach, say, hey, if you go on Google Scholar, you can't find weightlifting injuries and baseball players. It's very, very difficult to find those, or Olympic lifting injuries and baseball players. Okay? You have to show them there's evidence. They might not. You need to legitimize it that there has actually been, no work to support that, if I have more overhead strength, that could cause injury to me. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think it goes that way because those are in-season coaches. Say you got a high school team, and you're going to take them on the first day of practice to the weight room to work out, and the strength coach wants to do overhead lifts, and then they go out to the field the next day, and the pitching coach's like, all my pitchers have sore arms because they're tired. That's what overhead lifts do. That coach might feel like, well, I can't even have practice. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more of an in-season problem, and it's more inter-season criticism and rules and regulations that they're putting on you. And it's something you need to do better in your off-season so you can go in-season. Eccentrics might be enough just to keep you, keep your strength up from your off-season training.
Yeah. Real quick, I have a question for you on that. When we were talking earlier, when a guy gets into that front position, if he's got that, hindrance, whatever you want to call that, would you progress that guy into Olympic lifting, or would you take care of that imbalance first?
Immediately address that issue, because I can't move forward without it. So what I have to do is I have to help him in that front rack position. Front rack position is typically rhomboid tightness, it's levator scap tightness. You're typically so tight here, you can't protract, because once you protract, once this protracts this way, let it, because you're racking. Once you come here, now when your arm goes back, it's free. But if you're not protracted and you're out here, now it's all jammed up in there. So you can free it up just by getting the scaps to be a little more mobile.
You guys see me here? Because I just grabbed a barbell, okay? This is something very simple. You might not have the same strength as me. Some of you older guys would.
Gosh, soft brag.
But I mean, if you're a young guy, yeah. But even like if I'm here in an overhead position and I'm just holding a barbell, right, for time, or if I'm under a rack, okay, and I'm pushing up into a rack. Now look, this is light, but you're getting max activation pushing up into the pins in a rack that you're going to be able to get a lot of strength. But the other thing, like Jordan said, in terms of eccentric, right, that's when you're lowering the barbell, right? We have to have strength overhead. That's essential. You could do carries. This is basically a balance press, where I have the barbell.
A lot of proprioception there.
Yep. I got to stabilize my grip. It's huge and important. So, having different elements of overhead strength doesn't necessarily mean you got to lift heavy loads.
right, do the Thor pickup. You ever seen that?
From
It's
No.
like the Thor challenge. It goes like
you gotta
this.
do it.
You gotta put it down and pick it up from here.
Oh my god. Oh, wow.
Thor challenge. Here we go.
Wow.
You want to come over here?
Would you pick it
One,
up? in two
one
hands?
thing I learned real quick is don't demonstrate things you know you can't do.
No, you can't.
I can't do it this way. I can't do it this way.
There, he got it. He got it.
He's a lot of legs.
He got it.
I actually did 7 of those off camera.
He did.
You know, so I wish we would have had the video proof of it. But
But, you know, people are talking about bicep work. You know, one of the kids that we talked to had bicep tendonitis up here, right? So, you know, training your bicep, you could even be, you know, forehead level, and you're working your bicep in extension. Okay?
hey, Ryan, real quick, we got a question about using the bulletproof shoulder with J bands. So obviously we like our bands because obviously we are Crossover Symmetry. We're that same company. But also, if you go through and look at what happens when you're gripping on it, you want to talk about irradiation and why we like the handle on our bands?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, you got to think. Let's just say the barbell. As soon as I grip that barbell, it's going to activate as much of my arm as possible, right? The concept's called irradiation. So if I activate in one area of my body, it's going to amplify the recruitment of muscles in others. So, for example, if I am just wearing a cuff and I'm doing my ArmCare exercises, my hands open grip, it's relaxed, okay? That might be okay for a warm-up, but when you want to gain strength, I can get 6% more activation of my posterior rotator cuff muscles. Okay, one's called the infraspinatus, important muscle. It's a decelerator. But it actually, when I grip, it turns down my upper trap. Okay, a lot of shoulder problems happen because guys, they use a lot of upper traps.
Well, they overactivate
Yep.
the levator scap, which then makes the scap dysfunctional.
So when I grip, when I use grip, it actually has a better relationship between the activation between the upper trap and the lower trap. So that's really important. There's been a research study. The journal actually folded, but before the journal folded, I kept the study that, and anybody can reach out to me, Ryan@armcare.com. I'll send it to you about closed grip versus open hand band training and the differences in muscle activation. You got to think, you only have a limited amount of time to train, okay? So every time that you're going to train, you need to get as much out of the workout as possible. That has to happen with grip. When you're doing any kind of activity, even when you're doing rows, even when I'm pressing with the barbell overhead, I'm trying to grip that thing.
Well, there's a strong correlation between grip strength and upper body strength.
Of course.
So you can't build upper body strength without your grip strength.
Of course.
Yeah.
So long story short, obviously we have a handle on ours. We obviously have our new handle that came out with the crossover stuff. It's a little bit of a thicker handle.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fat grip approach.
It's a fatter grip,
Yeah.
the fat grips, just like that. So that's why we're larger proponents of using that style of training as opposed to something around the wrist. As well as even if you're just grabbing like a general band from Dick's Sporting Goods, we like that better handle.
I mean, I'm just straight up, y'all know what I'm saying. I'm not a big fan of putting your tubing around your wrist because you're almost not activating any of the upper arm. And like we talked about, the flexor pronator, big stabilizer of the UCL, the triceps to stabilize the UCL. So if I'm shutting this off and I'm only working in here, then I'm building arm strength with only working on half the arm. Like to me,
You're leaving a
that's
lot
not
on the
arm-
table.
Right.
You're leaving a lot on the table.
There's another thing too about if it's cuff generated tension, okay? One of the things that I see is that the wrist, when they're doing exercises, okay, whatever they may be, external rotation, open hand, is sometimes the wrist is an extension. Okay, so if I'm in an extension, that means that I'm contracting this side. This is shortening while I'm doing the activity. I'm actually assisting the movement. I'm not putting it on my muscles or my scap, but you're stretching the forearm muscles. You're actively stretching because if I turn on these muscles on the outside of my arm, I'm turning off these ones so I can stretch it. And what can happen is you're going to create a very lax stabilizer of the elbow. I mean, you look at the skeleton, you got this bump here, right? And then right inside here, this is where your ulnar collateral ligament is. And these muscles, the flexor muscles, they go over top of this ligament. And so if we're not creating strength, and we're lengthening it all the time, it's not going to be a very good stabilizer. The other thing that's the concern, why people have said, hey, I don't want to do band training, I want open hand, is because I don't want to fatigue the forearm muscles. That's the wrong kind of thinking,
that's
because
definitely
we need isometric grip, we need pinch grip, we need very strong and endured forearm muscles to be able to stabilize.
Yeah, because once this fatigues, now this is more vulnerable to damage. So it's like first line of defense, then your ligaments, your second line of defense.
You don't want that.
You don't want to lose your first line of defense.
Yep.
And what do they do in pro ball? Guy has a flexor strain, he's immediately on the DL. They don't play around with flexor strains. They're immediately on the DL because they know the next thing to go is the UCL.
Yeah. Well, there's a, if you have a forearm flexor strain, you have to make sure that you're really well rehabilitated. Okay, this is why I love the device, because you're going to know when you get hurt where was your strength, because while you're doing your rehab, you need to know you got to be stronger than when you got hurt. But you have a 27% chance. That's a big percent chance of having an ulnar collateral ligament reconstruction. So that's Tommy John surgery. You have a 27% chance if you have a forearm flexor strain. So you need the grip strength. You need the grip endurance. You need that.
Yeah. And you need an assessment tool that's telling you if it's failing or if it's up to par to keep you healthy through your performance. All right, let's see. We totally went out. We ready to work out? Jordan, you working out with us?
I already did my Thor lifts, you know.
Okay.
That Thor one is tough, man.
That's not that
I
bad.
had to use a
You
lot
just,
of
you
my
know.
legs.
That's going to be the 40-year-old challenge.
That's a tricky one.
That's what it's going to be. I don't know. I think we got it. Anything last thing y'all want to put out there?
No, I just, if you want to get a hold of us, it's Jordan. It's real easy. Jordan at armcare.com. Ryan at armcare.com. We'd love to hear from you. We want to look after you. We just want to make baseball better. We just want to make baseball safe. He makes the gas power here. He has the velocity. But he also, in TopVelocity, is looking after the players. He's one of the people on the forefront in the baseball leadership industry, and there's a few of them. I'm not going to name their names, but he is going to do it by safety and performance, and that's where we need to be in the game.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, right now, I know we talked about a little bit earlier for this time frame, we obviously want to, help your guys' users out. So for the time being, I know we created a code. If they type in TopVelocity at checkout, they're going to get a discount. If they go over to armcare.com, get yourself set up. I think it's 10% discount you guys are going to get. It's going to run for a bit there, obviously. But we're always happy to back guys like Brent. Obviously, they're doing awesome things here. They're really taking care of their players. Get in there. If you haven't been down to the facility, it's awesome. Aside from the humidity, this is a great place to come in and train. So.
Good food, right? And then one thing is, if you're going to get the device, you buy the device and then you get a subscription. Is there do y'all have a 3-day trial or anything?
So if they're buying it off the website, it's going to come with that.
Okay.
They're going to buy that option on there. They'll see the one that's pretty clearly laid out.
All right, and so you get this and then subscriptions to the app. So you get a great app. Is you want to tell them about any additional features in the app?
It's on there. Obviously, the guy had the question about the crossover symmetry, but we're going to have the pre-exam in there, which is going to let you know where your strength's at on the day. The post-exam, which, we could talk about pitch totals, because everybody knows I'm not a huge fan of pitch counts. Yeah. And that's going to be able to tell you exactly how your body's responding to that workload on the day, whether it's a throwing session, whether it was a bullpen, a game day, so you can really understand how those day 1 through 6s are going to work if you're on a 7-day. And then obviously we're going to have the arm primer, which is going to help you with your general throwing recommendations. And then obviously if you're pairing it with a coach and assistant that's already using it, it's only going to enhance your development as it goes.
And this, I got to show the whiteboard here. If you guys can see it. Might be tough to see, but pounds per miles per hour. That's our strength velocity ratio. We need to make sure for all of you, you want to gain velocity, we need to gain strength. That's throwing arm strength pounds over miles per hour. And we want that to be at 1.6. When you test yourself, if you don't have 60% more pounds of strength than your velo, you could put yourself in a bad place. So you want to make sure if you throw 100 miles an hour, you want total arm strength to be 160 pounds. That's the relationship. So that's huge. You got to work towards that.
Yeah, so you got a great tool to follow you through your season, even into the off seasons, be a great assistant to track your health through your career. So.
And again, that code at checkout, TopVelocity, one word, type it in, you'll get a discount on that.
All right, guys, thank you. We'll see you next time.